Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Robinson, and I'm a speech-language pathologist from Melbourne, Australia. It is my great honour to be here today in front of you all in beautiful San Diego, presenting face-to-face and virtually. I work at Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem, and I'm here today on behalf of our speech pathology department to present Your Voice, Your Choice, speech-language pathologist and consumer navigation of the ever-evolving process of voice banking for people living with motor neuron disease. So here are my financial and non-financial disclosures. And before I get started, I would like to acknowledge the wider speech pathology team at Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem, in particular Nicole Jackson and Lillian Crickelli. I would also like to give a great thanks to Motor Neuron Disease Victoria, and especially the Nina Buscombe Award for getting me here today, as well as the Alliance for allowing me to present, much to my surprise. To begin with, I will provide some brief context about voice banking at Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem, discuss the Calvary voice banking journey, and discuss some of the barriers and facilitators we experience within our practice. Following this, I will talk in more detail to and share our reflections on the process of creating a co-designed voice banking decision-making tool for people living with motor neuron disease, before finishing with some of our preliminary findings and the implications for current and future practice. So where do I work? Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem is a statewide health service provider and national leader in the provision of multidisciplinary team care for people living with progressive neurological disease, including people living with motor neuron disease. We provide inpatient, outpatient and community-based services, as well as offering a consultative service supporting clinicians working with people with MND across Australia. At any time, we are actively managing approximately 1,100 people living with a progressive neurological disease. So what is voice banking? MND Australia defines voice banking as the process that enables people to record a large inventory of their speech, which can then be used to create a synthetic voice. I wasn't going through the slides. This project focuses on voice banking and not the processes of message banking and legacy banking, as researched by John Costello and colleagues. In parallel with technological advancements, voice banking has become more accessible and time-consuming, with many programs available on the market. However, voice banking remains a complex and challenging space for allied health professionals due to the overwhelming choice of providers and a lack of evidence base to inform our decision-making. As outlined by Cave and Block in their 2020 research, the reality of using AAC and voice banking for communication is poorly understood by people living with motor neuron disease and allied health professionals. So historically, there has been low uptake of voice banking for people living with motor neuron disease who are seen at our service at Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem. To date, we have trialled providing information on voice banking using pamphlets and email follow-up, registering the patient with an account for voice banking, and a group delivery format, with no real improvement on our uptake levels using these methods. Therefore, a need has been identified to explore clients' and speech pathologists' perceptions of voice banking, including barriers and facilitators, in order to understand how current speech pathology practices may be changed in order to improve these processes. To move forward, the speech pathology department recognised the need to create a co-designed voice banking decision-making framework to support our clinical practice. So the idea for our project was born. The aims of this project are to ensure accessibility and timely introduction of voice banking for people with MND and to co-design a best practice model for voice banking implementation. The objectives of our project were understanding perspectives of voice banking from both staff and patients, to develop a co-designed clinical decision-making framework to support voice banking implementation, and to improve the confidence of allied health professionals in implementing voice banking. To start with, I would like to give you a bigger picture overview of our project, and then I will talk to how we addressed each of our objectives. Our study is a multi-phase project comprising survey, focus group, and patient feedback, which was approved by the Bethlehem Ethics Board. To achieve the objective of understanding both patient and speech pathologist perspectives, we completed survey, patient focus groups, and staff focus groups. We used the survey to reach new patients referred to speech pathology between the 1st of January to the 1st of July 2022. Inclusion criteria were people living with MND of any phenotype, and exclusion criteria were significant psychiatric disorder and people living with MND who also had a diagnosed frontotemporal dementia. During this time period, we received 47 new referrals. Of these 47 people, 4 deceased during the survey open period and 11 completed the survey, equating to 23.4%. This further indicates how vulnerable and timely we need to be with our interventions. We additionally invited participants who completed voice banking in the past year to enter the interview phase. For the group who had not completed voice banking, we had one focus group with 2 people and an individual interview. Then 2 individual interviews were conducted with participants who had completed voice banking. The speech pathology department were invited to attend a staff focus group. 7 speech pathologists and 1 allied health assistant attended this session. So the survey questions explored participants' demographic information such as age, M&D phenotype, expectations, experiences, and feedback on the voice banking process. This included whether or not they were offered it by a speech pathologist in the first place. At the conclusion of the survey, participants were provided with an opportunity to opt in to a focus group interview phase and nominate face-to-face or Zoom-based interviews based on their preferences. Additional people with M&D who had completed voice banking in the last year were also contacted to participate in order to provide useful consumer feedback. Speech pathologists were invited to attend a focus group conducted via Zoom. These sessions were video recorded to transcribe and analyse the data retrospectively. Organisation of data, coding and identification of themes is currently in process using Braun and Clark's 2006 framework for thematic analysis. So our results, what we all want to hear. The results that I will present today will encompass the outcomes from the survey and the preliminary findings from the focus group and interview phase. I will also show you our decision-making and feature matching tools in our draft form. So what did we find? Looking at the results from the survey, these are some of the main findings. Of the survey respondents, 8 out of 11 were not offered voice banking. Of those 8 who were not offered voice banking, 7 respondents would have been interested in finding out more information. Of the 3 respondents who were offered voice banking, 2 did not go in to complete the process, stating it was not felt to be urgent and they needed to further research, and also that they would like to be shown. And what happened in the focus groups? Thematic coding of the transcriptions from the focus group for people living with motor neuron disease is currently in process. Some of the preliminary themes evident following the thematic coding process are motivation, timing, acceptance, and readiness. Motivations can be internally or externally mediated for the person with MND. That is, the person may be internally motivated to complete voice banking based on how socially connected they are. On the other hand, they can be externally motivated by the influence of the speech pathologist or a carer. Timing refers to the dilemma of when to introduce voice banking. However, it is important to note that timing alone does not influence acceptance or readiness. All participants, including those who had not completed or had not yet completed voice banking, stated that voice banking needs to be offered early. In fact, the earlier, the better. Acceptance of voice banking relates to what makes the technology and process more acceptable to the person, and readiness relates to acceptance and coping with the diagnosis, which influences the emotional readiness to undertake voice banking. So one of our participants provided an excellent example of his external motivation, stating that I've been given a deadline under which to get it done. She was brutal, the speech pathologist. I asked her to be brutal, and this deadline was Christmas. So within the speech pathology staff group, preliminary themes evident following the thematic coding process are the pitch, which incorporates clinical confidence, priority, timing, practice adjustment, and follow-up procedures. Referring to the pitch, many speech pathologists found it challenging to bring up a discussion around voice banking. This issue will be illustrated beautifully in the next slide. Speech pathologists also found it challenging to prioritise voice banking with other presenting issues such as swallowing, current communication function and secretion management, especially within a short time frame of an initial assessment. Somewhat related to the timing theme for the patient group, timing was also an issue for staff where they felt that entry to the service for bulbar MND patients in particular was too late and therefore voice banking was no longer a feasible option. Some speech pathologists spoke of needing to adjust their standard clinical practice, which raises some questions about the need for a behaviour change and a cultural shift within our organisation. Finally, a main theme that has arisen is the need for follow-up and how we potentially lose patients early if we don't follow up in person. A clear message was that email and follow-ups alone are ineffective, and a one-to-one approach is needed to ensure patients see voice banking through to completion. So this slide illustrates a number of themes I just mentioned, including confidence, the pitch, and timing. So one of our speech language pathologists commented, "I really struggle to bring it up, particularly with people that have been diagnosed. For me personally, I find it really uncomfortable to do it." Our facilitator responded with, "What do people find uncomfortable? Does it feel like you're overloading people?" This speech pathologist then responded, "There's already so much information that we're talking about, and then to bring up voice banking, because you may or may not, depending on the type of MND they've been diagnosed with, you may or may not lose your voice. I think it's a lot for someone to take on." Very fair points. So, as I've explained, we're still in the process of finalising the results from the interviews and the focus groups with people living with motor neuron disease and our speech pathologists. The decision-making flowchart, as shown on the screen, is in draft form. It highlights the process from referral through to completion of voice banking. So at the top, you can see we receive a new MND referral. We then move down to a speech pathology initial assessment. Within this assessment we decide, is the patient a candidate for voice banking? If this isn't discussed in the initial assessment, we need to book a follow-up assessment to ensure this is done. If the patient is a candidate for voice banking, we provide informational counselling and demonstrate an example of our own banked voice, which was a theme from our patient focus groups, that's what they would like to see. They would like to see an example of what a banked voice is. So after this informational counselling, we determine, is the patient interested in voice banking? If they are, we then need to choose the voice banking provider, which you can see over the left. We have some considerations for choosing that provider, such as support, IT access, funding, etc. And we refer to our feature matching guide, which you'll see on the next slide. Once the voice banking provider has been chosen, does the patient have access to the appropriate technology? If they don't, we as speech pathologists need to assist in accessing this technology. If they do have it, or once they do have it, we start the process. So the speech pathology focus group also highlighted the challenge of the ever-advancing technology, the amount of providers now available, and the confidence to select a provider and justify why. To address this, our department decided to develop a feature matching tool, which you can see on the screen. So the tool we developed was adapted from a seminar that John Costello, thank you John, presented to our department in July 2021. The tool provides information regarding pricing in Australian dollars, the time commitment required, and the software and communication devices that the voice banking provider is compatible with. It is important to note that we do not use this tool to inundate the person with MND with information about providers. It is so the speech pathologist can prescribe the right service for each person's unique needs. And this tool will continuously be updated as new providers arise, such as hopefully the one we heard about yesterday. So where are we at now? Well, this project is very much still underway and a work in progress. However, it has already allowed us to identify some of the facilitators and barriers to providing voice banking at our service. Increasing staff knowledge and skills, as well as having more opportunities to see our patients through to completion of voice banking, will certainly contribute to an increase in confidence. We've also identified that having a script and having a consistent but person-centred approach will also facilitate increased outcomes. A one-to-one follow-up has been identified as a key contributor to the success of voice banking, as was identified as a facilitator by both staff and patient groups. Timely referral and introduction of voice banking is a critical component to ensuring the uptake of voice banking is optimised within the service, especially for those individuals with bulbar onset MND who may miss out on banking their voice due to quick onset of dysarthria. Of course, it is important to note that there were barriers identified in the implementation of voice banking within our service. It goes without saying, healthcare contexts often have competing demands and constraints on time, and therefore voice banking has historically been deprioritised. Existing dysarthria for new patients who enter our service after MND diagnosis is a clear barrier when voice banking. Finally, we hope this research addresses the inaccurate, though well-intentioned, perceptions of speech-language pathologists when considering the person with MND and their readiness to undertake voice banking in the context of the constellation of other interventions they are receiving. Early voice banking introduction is fundamental in ensuring that the opportunity for patients to use their voices is not lost in the future. So our project is still in the data analysis phase, as I've mentioned. However, very real steps have been made towards ensuring that our processes are informed by patient and staff experience. Finally, our long-term goal is to establish a voice banking clinic that will support people living with MND to complete voice banking in a timely manner. So to conclude my presentation, I would like to play you a recording. One of our participants provided consent for this to be played at our conference today. At the end of his interview, he had a take-home message for people with MND who are on the fence about voice banking. Here's what he had to say.
So I would say to people, do the voice banking and then forget about it. And it's there ready for you to use. You don't have to think about it again. But it's done, it's in the bank, and it's ready for you to draw down on when you feel that you can, So you may never ever get to use it, or you may get to use it, but at least it's there and you won't be sorry that it's there. You'll never be sorry that you did voice banking, but you could always be sorry that you didn't.
A really great quote, one that sticks with me and hopefully all of us today, and a great take-home message from my presentation. And here are my contact details, so our principal investigator, Nicole Jackson, and presenter, myself. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Rachel. That was a lovely presentation. I just see if there are any questions. Do you, as a therapist, have you noticed a difference between those people that have banked their voice and those people that use a kind of a synthesized, off-the-peg kind of voice? Is there a difference in their kind of quality of life, do you think?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. I mean, there's so much quality to having your own voice and something personalised that you can communicate with. I mean, we all know how the generic voices are, and it's not as personalised communication, and I feel there is great benefit to having that personalised voice for not only just your own quality of life, but the quality of life of your family and your friends and the people you're communicating with. It's really beneficial. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Jess has one.
Okay, this is from Stephanie and SUNY. Okay, wonderful presentation. I can imagine that this is an extremely difficult conversation to initiate and have. I'm wondering if verbalizing to patients and families, this may not be of need in your future, but I want to be sure that you have all the info well in advance so that you can make the decision that is right for you.
Yeah, that's a great point, and something that we definitely need to be mentioning to our patients is that we aren't sure whether you will lose your voice or you won't lose your voice, but like our participant at the end said there, that it's like an insurance policy. You won't ever regret doing the voice banking. So, I mean, there's no harm in getting it done. So, yeah, that's a great point.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I'm just curious of the results that you have from the patients that you surveyed, what the proportion of acceptance was for limb onset clients versus bulbar?
Yeah, so that information I don't actually have because we had such a small sample, and engaging in this study, we realised that the amount of people we offered voice banking was quite low, which is something that we need to work on. We're hoping to increase that. So we don't actually have the proportion of the different onset of MND, but it would be really great to continue the study and find out, the percentage of different onsets. But yeah, great question.